Salutations, fellow readers, writers, and killers of time on YouTube. My name is Martha Jones, and I would like to use the androgynous sounds of my voice to share with you a few words on Death of the Author, and what Bill Cosby and Adolf Hitler have in common, just as the clickbaity title suggests. Ever since way, way back, before there was a Rome, in Egypt, or Babylon, the word author has been synonymous with the word writer. This is a fact that is reflected to this day by entry number 2 under author in reference books the likes of Webster's New World Dictionary. The reason it is number 2 and not number 1 is because before Rome, Egypt, or Babylon, like back when the ancient Sumerians were the contemporary Sumerians, the meaning of the word author was used in a context more along the lines of dictionary entry number 1, which identifies said author as one who originates or creates something. I say this because I'd like to talk about a specific originator and how his work relates to the topic at hand, though his authorship pertains to lyrics and music more so than it does to books. So, beloved singer-songwriter Marvin Gaye began his career as a fairly typical Motown entertainer. He dressed nice, he shaved on the regular, and he sang songs that were pretty good. Not awe-inspiring or life-changing by any means, but solid, catchy songs that reliably made money for both Mr. Gaye and legendary Detroit-born star-maker Berry Gordy. Then came the 60s, and with them an era of civil unrest, police brutality, a war in Vietnam, and a couple of presidents so absurdly corrupt the political cartoons practically wrote themselves. Whew! Glad that's all over. Suddenly, the world was a bloodier, sweatier, less trustworthy place than Americans had hitherto believed it was. And, in response to this era of tears and turmoil, Mr. Gaye recorded his landmark album, What's Going On?, a collection of protest songs that producer Berry Gordy was certain would ruin Gaye's career. It did not. Instead, the album resonated with listeners like few albums before it or since, and inspired generations of music makers thereafter. Rather than take personal pride in a job well done, Mr. Gaye felt that his album belonged to the world, that it had always belonged to the world, and that he was merely the person through whom it chose to enter. People were confused and needed reassurance. God was offering that reassurance through his music. I was privileged to be the instrument. The attitude Mr. Gaye showed toward what many consider to be his greatest work bears an uncanny resemblance to a concept known in literary circles as death of the author, a school of thought which suggests that art should be judged separately from the artist, as if the artist is, well, dead, and can offer no rebuttal for any fault we find, either with the art or with the artist who made it. Just for example, let's say you're a little kid, and like other little kids before you, you have drawn a tree. Also, like other little kids before you, you make the tactical error of seeking validation from your critics. If a critic loves you and is therefore predisposed to like anything you do, aka Grandma, the worst she's likely to say in regards to your work is, tell me more about your picture, sweetie. What were you feeling when you drew it? If, on the other hand, your critics are indifferent to you and your feelings, aka any number of random kids from school, they will be more inclined to judge your work with less of a biased viewpoint, heedless to the fact that your ego may or may not be made of eggshells. So on the downside of this whole thing, you might end up with some sadistic critics who feel empowered to say extra harsh things about you when acting as though you were a dead author and cannot fight back. But on the plus side, if you manage to impress the critics who don't necessarily like you personally, you can get a less falsely inflated notion of how good your work truly is. Yet with shifting marketing trends tending to favor authors who take an active role in selling their books, the whole concept of this so-called dead author is an increasingly unrealistic one. As recently as the 1990s, Anne Rice and Stephen King were, for all intents and purposes, dead authors. The average reader did not necessarily care what these authors ate for breakfast, what their writing process was, whether or not they were nice to their fans, or if they suffered from debilitating drug problems. King and Rice were merely the names in bold across a host of paperbacks that gave us a pretty good idea about what to expect from these books should we decide to, peek beneath their covers. In recent years, thanks to platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, we see lots of living authors who cannot help but impose their intent on their readers. This makes it nearly impossible to shield ourselves from authorial intent, and in many cases, ready access to the author's thoughts and personal life has not done any favors for the authors or their books. Would you believe there was a time in the not-too-distant past when readers could enjoy the Harry Potter books without thinking about Professor Dumbledore's sex life? Would you have believed back in 1992 that at this point in history Adolf Hitler would be a more marketable author than Bill Cosby? Then again, Stephen King has become a living author in recent years, and his candidness regarding things like his drug addiction have served to humanize him and make him more loved in some ways. So, life of the author certainly doesn't kill public image equally across the board. Nevertheless, if an author becomes notorious for good or evil, is it even possible to judge his or her work on its own merit, not the author's reputation or intent? Well, that depends on the author, and how irreplaceable we as readers believe that author is. And the truth is there are very few irreplaceable authors out there. Let's take a closer look at Adolf Hitler and Bill Cosby, who are both technically writers. To be absolutely clear, I never, ever want to see Hitler's name on the New York Times bestseller list. But, having worked in a bookstore the year that the originator of Fat Halbert guest starred on a very special Law & Order SVU, I totally could have expected to sell out of Mein Kampf quicker that Christmas than any 12 books from the Little Bill series. The principal difference is that Adolf Hitler was a loud, bigoted tyrant who never strayed from his brand. Unlike Cosby, Hitler did not speak with authority about his love for Jell-O pudding, and he did not spend decades of his life carefully crafting the image of childhood friend and mentor Dr. Huxtable. Have you ever heard people in sales talk about how customers actually buy you, not your product? Well, Cosby's product was an idyllic picture of what domestic life could look like for the average American family, specifically average American families of color. That is the legacy Bill Cosby meant to author. But at this point in the game, does what he meant to do matter in light of what he did? I'm not sure we can know the answer to that in Cosby's lifetime. One of the benefits of not being a dead author is the potential to change your image. It's unlikely that the world will see old boy as kindly Dr. Huxtable again, but who knows? Maybe he'll write a best-selling tell-all about appalling prison conditions, or become an animal rights activist for the dwindling wild chicken population of the Florida Keys. Right. My incredibly biased takeaway from this weird, convoluted talk about death of the author is this. First of all, an author is a guy or gal who makes something that is often, but not always, a book. Second of all, that author is entitled to his or her take on what that thing he made is or is not, but, third of all, an author cannot control his or her audience's reaction to the thing they have made. And fourth, Marvin Gaye is a proper noun, related to musical excellence, in contrast to other proper nouns, such as Robin Thicke. I have opinions. Thank you for giving these videos a shot. I post whenever the day job allows. In the meantime, take it easy. Loves you. Bye. I'm told there's a place in France where the something something